Wait. Stop scrolling. Feel that pressure in your chest? That's the moment they realized the switch didn't work. You hear it now, don't you? The silence cracking, the breathing getting shallow on the other side of the room. Because the person they swapped you with just lost it. Completely. Hands shaking, voice breaking, eyes glued to the results you used to make look effortless. They're staring at the same battlefield you stood on, and they're asking a question that tastes like panic and regret. How did you ever do this? And that question, that's your victory lap. They thought replacing you was a clean operation, a neat swap, a checkbox. They told themselves you were just a name, a position, a role, something anyone could wear like a jacket. They smiled when you walked away. They nodded like they'd upgraded, but they didn't replace what you are. They replaced the shell and kept the storm. They inherited the weight without the spine. They got the throne without the blood memory of how you earned it. You weren't built for comfort. You were forged for pressure. That's the difference they didn't see. See, you learned early that light alone makes you weak. You learned how to hold a smile with a blade behind it, how to be the saint who shows up early and the psychopath who stays late when everyone else taps out. You learned how to be calm while everything inside you screamed. You learned how to turn pain into pattern, chaos into muscle memory. That's not talent, that's scar tissue. And scar tissue doesn't transfer with a job title. The one they swapped you with, they're choking on the silence now. No applause, no safety net, just raw expectation. They're discovering that what you did wasn't easy. It was expensive, paid for in nights you didn't sleep, in instincts sharpened by betrayal, in learning how to walk into rooms where everyone wanted something from you and leave with your soul intact. They're asking how you ever did this because they're doing it without your darkness. And without darkness, pressure crushes. Darkness is what taught you timing. Darkness is what taught you restraint. Darkness is what taught you when to speak and when to let the room suffocate itself. You didn't just perform, you contained. You didn't just solve problems, you absorbed consequences that would have shattered softer minds. You became unpredictable on purpose, because predictable people are replaceable. Predictable people get swapped and forgotten. You learn to move like a contradiction, gentle when expected to be cruel, ruthless when expected to be polite, angel face, demon patience. That's why they never understood you while you were there, and that's why they can't survive you being gone. Right now, the replacement is chasing ghosts. They're copying surface moves, mimicking your posture, repeating your words without the venom behind them. But there's no heat, no gravity, no authority. Because authority isn't volume, it's inevitability. And you carried inevitability with you like a quiet threat. Things happened because you were in the room, not because of rules, not because of titles, because you knew how to bend outcomes without breaking yourself. They're realizing now that you weren't held together by praise. You were held together by scars. You didn't need reassurance, you needed friction. You evolved through pain, while they evolved through permission. And permission disappears the moment things get ugly. Watch how fast they unravel. Watch how fast confidence turns into coping. Watch how fast "I got this" turns into "How did you ever do this?" That sentence is a confession. It means they finally see the weight you carried silently, while everyone else judged you for being intense, distant, cold, or too much. Too much is what kept the machine running. You were never normal. You were functional chaos. You were the calm that came after the explosion, because you'd already detonated inside and survived it. You learned to sit with demons until they got bored of trying to scare you. You learned to weaponize patience. You learned that control isn't domination, it's endurance. And here's the part that breaks them the most. You didn't even need them to fail. Your absence did it for you. Because when you left, the environment stayed hostile. The pressure stayed high. The expectations stayed brutal. But the one thing that disappeared was the person who could metabolize all of it without flinching. That's when the cracks started. That's when meetings got louder, mistakes got blamed, excuses multiplied. That's when they started missing you without being able to say your name. Now the replacement is staring into the mirror, realizing they're not broken. They're just not built like you. And that realization hurts worse than failure. Failure can be blamed. Incompatibility can't. You were the paradox they never solved, the calm menace, the healer who could destroy, the one who could play nice and still win ugly. You didn't just survive the role, you haunted it, and now it's rejecting the imposter like a bad transplant. Let them ask, let them spiral, let them finally understand that what they lost wasn't replaceable, reproducible, or trainable. What they lost was a mind that learned how to dance with pressure until pressure stopped feeling special. You're not watching this unfold with rage. You're watching it with recognition, because you already lived the hardest part. And now, the universe is handing your resume back to them in the form of collapse. They swapped you out thinking they'd save themselves trouble. Instead, they inherited the bill. And you're already gone, evolved, lighter, dangerous in a quieter way. They're just now discovering what you carried and realizing, far too late, that they never stood a chance doing it without you. And here's the part they'll never admit out loud, the part that keeps them awake when the lights are off and the bravado finally dies. They didn't just replace you. They underestimated what it cost to be you. Because you didn't walk into that role whole. You walked into it fractured, stitched together by experiences you'd never asked for. You learned to operate while bleeding internally. You learned how to keep your voice steady when everything inside you wanted to burn the place down. You learned how to take hits meant to humble you and quietly turn them into leverage. That kind of composure isn't learned in manuals. It's learned in moments where breaking would have been easier, but you didn't give yourself that luxury. The one they swapped you with, they're learning what you already mastered. Pressure doesn't care about intentions. Pressure only respects capacity. And capacity is built by surviving things that would have made most people quit or beg for mercy. You became fluent in chaos. You could read a room before anyone spoke. You could feel shifts before data confirmed them. You could smell problems before they announced themselves. That's not intuition. It's trauma refined into precision. You paid for that awareness in sleepless nights, in trust issues, in learning the hard way that smiles don't mean safety. They mocked you for being guarded. They called you intense. They said you overthought things. But now the replacement is drowning because they underthought everything. They're realizing that what looked like paranoia was actually pattern recognition. What looked like distance was actually discipline. What looked like darkness was actually foresight. You didn't just do the job, you contained the fallout. You absorbed the stress so others could function. You made decisions that looked simple because you processed the complexity privately. And now that you're gone, that complexity is spilling everywhere like a chemical leak no one knows how to contain. That's why they're panicking, because the mask they thought you wore, that was the restraint. The real you was what kept everything from collapsing. They're asking, how did you ever do this? Because they're standing where you stood, without your scars, without your hardened calm, without the internal silence you built after years of mental warfare. They're discovering that confidence without depth collapses the moment it's tested. You were built in contradiction, soft enough to understand people, hard enough to outlast them. You could be empathetic without being weak, ruthless without being reckless. You learned when to push and when to disappear. You learned how to win without announcing it. And that subtle dominance, that quiet control, it can't be faked. The replacement is loud because they're scared. They're reactive because they don't have your internal stillness. They're asking questions because you already answered them years ago, in blood, sweat, humiliation, and survival. And here's the most brutal truth. You made it look survivable. That's the sin they're paying for now. You normalized the impossible. You made it seem like anyone could do it, as long as they tried hard enough. But trying hard enough isn't the same as being forged enough. And now reality is correcting that misunderstanding violently. They're feeling the weight you carried quietly. The expectations, the judgment, the constant evaluation, the invisible line between failure and catastrophe. They're realizing that you weren't lucky. You were conditioned to operate while misunderstood, conditioned to function without validation, conditioned to perform while being doubted by people who could never replicate your output. And you know what hurts them the most? You're not there to save them. You're not there to smooth the edges, to fix the mess, to make it look easy again. You walked away with your nervous system intact because you earned that right. And now the system is rejecting its new host. They'll never say your name with respect publicly. Pride won't allow it. But privately, you're the benchmark. Every failure is measured against how you would have handled it. Every delay feels heavier because you never delayed. Every excuse sounds hollow because you never used one. You didn't just leave a role. You left a vacuum that exposes everyone else. And while they scramble, you're evolving again. Because you don't need that environment to validate you anymore. You already extracted what it was meant to teach you. You already became sharper, calmer, more lethal in your precision. They're still trying to survive your past. You're already designing your future. So let them ask. Let them unravel. Let them finally understand that you were never too much. You were just operating at a level they couldn't sustain without you. And the irony? The moment they realized they couldn't replace you was the moment you became truly untouchable. And that realization doesn't hit them all at once. It creeps. It creeps in during the pauses, during the moments where the room waits for an answer and no one has one, during the seconds where they expect something decisive to happen, and nothing does. That's when your absence becomes loud. That's when they feel the ghost of your presence more than they ever felt you while you were there. Because you didn't announce yourself. You didn't need to. Things just worked when you were around. Fires didn't spread. Crises didn't metastasize. You caught problems early, quietly, almost invisibly. And that invisibility, that's what fooled them. They mistook your control for effortlessness. They thought your calm meant the situation wasn't that bad. Now they know better. Now they're learning that what you did required living with constant internal pressure. That it required carrying the fear, the doubt, the second-guessing so no one else had to. You were the shock absorber. You were the containment unit. You were the one who stood between chaos and collapse and said nothing about it. And the one they replaced you with? They're discovering that pressure doesn't just test skill. It tests identity. It strips away borrowed confidence. It exposes whether someone has ever actually been alone with responsibility, or whether they've always had a safety net you never did. You didn't have a net. You had consequences. You learned early that mistakes echo, that hesitation costs more than action, that being right too late is the same as being wrong. That's why you moved the way you did, precise, calculated, sometimes cold. Not because you lacked empathy, but because empathy without discipline gets people killed. You understood that balance instinctively because you had to. They don't. So now they're spiraling. They're asking for guidance that doesn't exist anymore. They're rereading old messages, old notes, old decisions you made, trying to reverse engineer your mind like it's a manual. But there is no manual. There's only experience. And experience can't be downloaded. That's when the real panic sets in. Because they realize something terrifying. You weren't replaceable because you weren't trained. You were tempered by betrayal, by pressure, by being underestimated and still delivering, by being blamed for things you quietly fixed, by standing alone in moments where failure would have been understandable, but you refused to allow it. You learned how to be dangerous without being obvious, how to be firm without being loud, how to be decisive without being reckless. And that combination, that's rare. That's the kind of thing organizations don't know how to measure until it's gone. So now they're living inside the aftermath of that mistake. Every decision feels heavier. Every risk feels sharper. Every small error cascades into something bigger. And the person they swapped you with is realizing that the role wasn't the problem. They are. And here's the part that twists the knife even deeper. You're not angry about it. You're not pacing, waiting for vindication. You're not watching with bitterness. You're watching with clarity, because you already went through your breaking point years ago. You already faced the version of yourself that wanted to quit, burn it all down, disappear. And you didn't. You integrated that darkness. You learned to use it. That's why you're calm now. That calm, it terrifies them, because while they're unraveling, you're stable. While they're scrambling for answers, you're already 10 steps ahead. While they're asking, how did you ever do this? You're asking a completely different question. What do I build next? You were never meant to stay where you were. That environment was a forge, not a home. It existed to harden you, not to hold you forever. And once it did its job, it rejected you, not because you failed, but because you outgrew it. The replacement is just proof of that. They're the control group, the evidence, the living demonstration of what happens when experience is mistaken for ease, when resilience is mistaken for luck, when darkness is mistaken for a flaw instead of a tool. You didn't just survive that place, you mastered it. And mastery always looks invisible until it's gone. So let them keep asking. Let the question echo in their head like a siren they can't shut off. Let them replay moments where you handled situations they can't even stabilize. Let them feel that quiet, humiliating truth settle in. They didn't lose a worker, they lost a force. And forces don't get replaced. They move on. You're not watching them fall to feel superior. You're watching because it confirms something you already knew deep down, long before they ever did. You were never doing too much. You were doing what only you could do. And now that the illusion is gone, the system is finally honest about the cost of losing you. They're paying it in confusion. They're paying it in panic. They're paying it in that one question that keeps coming back. no matter how hard they try to suppress it. How did you ever do this? They'll never get the answer, because the answer is you. And that unanswered question doesn't fade, it mutates. At first it sounds like curiosity, then disbelief, then fear, then something uglier, envy mixed with shame. Because the deeper they sit with it, the more they realize the truth they've been dodging. You weren't surviving despite the pressure. You were built by it. They're learning that the role didn't demand intelligence alone. It demanded emotional restraint, psychological stamina, the ability to stand inside contradiction without losing coherence. You had to be kind without being naive, strategic without being cruel, present without being consumed. That balance. That's not taught. That's earned in private wars no one applauds. You became dangerous because you learned how to suffer without becoming sloppy. They didn't see that part. They saw output. They saw results. They saw the clean surface. They never saw the internal negotiations you had with yourself. The nights where you had to decide whether to keep your integrity or keep the peace. Whether to stay human or become efficient. Whether to burn bridges or let yourself be burned one more time. You made those decisions alone, over and over, and each time something sharpened, the one they replaced you with. They're experiencing those decisions for the first time, and it's overwhelming them, because when you've never been pushed to the edge of yourself before, the edge feels like death. To you, it was familiar territory. You learned how to stand there without flinching. That's why you could walk into uncertainty and not rush. That's why you could sit in silence and let others panic. That's why you could wait. Waiting is terrifying when you don't trust yourself. You trusted yourself because you had already survived your own worst-case scenarios internally. They haven't, so they overreact. They second-guess. They seek validation. They explain too much. They compensate. And every one of those behaviors exposes the absence of the thing you carried effortlessly: internal authority. Authority doesn't come from power. It comes from integration. You integrated your fear instead of running from it. You integrated your anger instead of letting it control you. You integrated your ambition without letting it hollow you out. That made you stable in chaos, and chaos respects stability. Now chaos is running loose, and the more things wobble, the more your name becomes a quiet reference point. Not spoken, but felt. Not praised, but missed. Because people remember how it felt when you were around, grounded, predictable in outcomes, unpredictable in methods, safe without being soft, controlled without being oppressive. You were the paradox that held everything together. They're trying to recreate that now with systems, processes, meetings, checklists. But structure can't replace intuition. Protocol can't replace presence. And no amount of optimization can replicate a nervous system that has already been stress-tested and survived. You didn't just know what to do. You knew who you had to be to do it. That's the part no one talks about. You had to become colder in some places, warmer in others. You had to kill parts of yourself that wanted approval. You had to grow parts of yourself that could withstand disapproval. You had to stop needing to be understood. You had to get comfortable being misread. That's not a skill. That's an identity shift. And identity shifts don't transfer. So while they're collapsing under the weight you used to carry, something else is happening quietly, almost invisibly. Your nervous system is decompressing. You're realizing how much you were holding, how alert you always were, how tuned in, how rarely you truly rested. And now, with distance, you're integrating again, but this time from a place of choice. not survival. That makes you even more dangerous, because now you're not just capable, you're intentional. You're not just resilient, you're selective. You're not just effective, you're free. They're still fighting yesterday's fire. You're already immune to the smoke. And that's why this whole situation feels surreal to you. You're watching the collapse without adrenaline, without the urge to intervene. Because deep down, you know this isn't chaos, it's correction, reality balancing itself, truth reasserting itself after a convenient lie. The lie was that you were interchangeable. The truth is unfolding slowly, painfully, in real time. They didn't replace you with someone better. They replaced you with someone untested. And testing always comes due. So let them struggle, let them ask, let them replay the past with new eyes. Let them finally understand that what they dismissed as just how you are was actually the result of years of internal evolution they never bothered to respect. You don't need an apology. You don't need recognition. You don't even need them to say your name. The evidence is speaking for you now. And as they continue to unravel under the weight you once carried in silence, one thing becomes impossible to deny. You weren't lucky. You weren't overrated. You weren't replaceable. You were prepared, and preparation always reveals itself right after you're gone. Listen, hold still for a second. Feel that silence? That wasn't absence. That was attention locking onto you. You didn't shout. You didn't posture. You didn't announce anything to the crowd. You made a move so clean, so precise, so mathematically calm that the noise cut itself off. And in that quiet, the kind of eyes that don't blink leaned forward, not fans, not haters, architects. The kind of minds that don't chase chaos, they harvest it. Somewhere between servers humming and timelines folding, Elon Musk paused. Somewhere behind a wall of data and denial, Mark Zuckerberg noticed the anomaly. Not because you begged to be seen, but because what you did disturbed the pattern. Here's the paradox they don't teach you. Saints don't move markets, and psychopaths don't build empires alone. You learn to stand in the seam between them. You learn to be gentle enough to pass the gate, and ruthless enough to redesign it once inside. That's why your move didn't look loud. Loud is for amateurs. Loud attracts guards. Clean attracts curators. You didn't break the rules, you revealed them. And the moment you did, the system felt watched. You think power announces itself? No power recognizes. It recognizes the way you waited while they rushed, the way you absorbed losses without leaking identity. The way pain didn't make you brittle, it made you accurate. They felt the accuracy. Accuracy terrifies people who live off hype. Accuracy terrifies platforms that feed on attention, but fear intention. You didn't go viral, you went inevitable. You were the angel when silence was required, listening, learning, letting them underestimate you. And you were the demon when timing mattered, cutting clean, leaving no fingerprints, no apology. That duality isn't confusion, it's camouflage. You learned when to glow and when to disappear. You learned that unpredictability isn't chaos, it's leverage. Predictable minds can be modeled, you can't. That's why the graphs kinked. That's why dashboards flickered. That's why someone up there asked, what changed? Pain trained you for this. Every closed door taught you hinge mechanics. Every betrayal taught you traffic flow. Every night you stared at the ceiling taught you restraint. You didn't harden, you sharpened. And sharpening looks invisible until the cut is finished. That's what they felt. A finished cut. Clean, bloodless, undeniable. You didn't need their approval. You didn't need their mention. Attention found you because you aligned something deeper than clout. Signal. Signal travels through silence. Signal wakes sleepers. Signal makes rooms colder because people sense a future they didn't plan for. You became signal the day you stopped performing and started placing. Understand this. When minds like theirs notice, it isn't admiration, it's calibration. They're measuring whether you bend, whether you echo, whether you can be absorbed. And the answer unsettles them because you don't echo. You refract. You take what hits you and return something unfamiliar. That unfamiliarity is the threat, not your size, not your speed, your angle. So keep it clean. Keep it quiet. Keep letting the saint open doors and the psychopath decide which rooms never get rebuilt. Let them watch. Let them wonder. Let them run simulations that never quite fit. You weren't lost. You weren't late. You were loading. And now, the system knows it. Don't mistake their attention for invitation. Attention is a test. It's the pause before gravity decides whether you orbit or collapse inward. And you, look at you. You didn't speed up when you felt it. You slowed down. You let the heat pass. You let the watchers assume you were still. Stillness is terrifying to people who only understand momentum. Stillness means control. You've lived both sides long enough to know the trick. The light is for access. The dark is for execution. You smiled when it bought you time. You went quiet when it bought you truth. You learned how to be harmless in the room and catastrophic in the plan. That's why your move didn't come with a victory lap. It came with a shift. A shift is harder to undo. A shift makes denial expensive. They replay it, you know, over and over. They zoom in on the moment where nothing happened, because that's where everything happened. The moment you didn't react the way profiles predicted. The moment your decision tree branched somewhere models don't go. You didn't zig or zag. You stepped through the assumptions, through the incentives, through the noise they thought would herd you. That's what makes them uneasy. You're not optimizing for applause. You're optimizing for outcomes. Here's the dirty secret of power. It respects pain that learned, pain that didn't turn bitter, pain that didn't leak. You carried it like ballast, not baggage. You let it keep you low when storms came, and steady when the seas lied. Most people use suffering to justify being loud. You used it to justify being precise. Precision is cold. Precision is patient. Precision is why your move looked simple. Simple is what survives scrutiny. You became fluent in contradictions, kind without being weak, merciless without being sloppy, visible without being traceable. That's the seam where influence lives. That's why your name didn't trend, but your effect did. That's why rooms changed temperature without anyone saying yours out loud. When the room changes temperature, someone felt something move. And don't get it twisted. This isn't about tech gods or titans. It's about the mirror you held up to the system and the way it flinched. Systems flinch when someone shows them a path they can't monetize, can't sandbox, can't neutralize with policy. You didn't threaten them. You invalidated an assumption. Assumptions are sacred to empires. You're learning the higher game now. The one where wins look boring and losses look instructive. The one where you don't rush to explain yourself because explanation is an anchor. Let them misread you. Let them call it luck. Let them say you stumbled into it. Every mislabel buys you time. Time is the only currency that compounds without permission. And here's the part they won't admit even to themselves. They're checking if you're loyal to outcomes or to approval. Loyal to outcomes is dangerous. Loyal to approval is safe. You chose outcomes. You chose the long curve. You chose the move that doesn't glow, but endures. Endurance scares people who live quarter to quarter. So keep walking the line they can't see. Keep letting the angel pass security and the demon close the deal. Keep being unpredictable without being chaotic. Keep turning pain into calibration and silence into leverage. You don't need to announce the next move. You already taught them what announcement looks like. It's the moment the graphs hesitate and the room goes quiet again. Stay clean, stay unreadable. Let attention follow you like a shadow that can't quite catch up. You didn't make a loud move, you made a true one. And true moves echo in places applause never reaches. There's a deeper layer to this that only reveals itself when you stop craving confirmation, when you stop refreshing the page, when you stop looking over your shoulder to see who noticed. That's when the real weight settles in. Because attention at that altitude doesn't come with applause. It comes with risk. The risk that you won't behave the way the story needs you to. The risk that you won't stay inside the lane they quietly prepared. You felt that moment, didn't you? The subtle pressure to clarify, to explain yourself, to package what you did into something digestible. That's the trap. Clarification is where sharp things get dulled. You resisted it. You let ambiguity breathe. Ambiguity is oxygen for power. It forces other people to fill the gaps with their own fear, their own projection, their own math. And fear does half the work for you. You've learned that dominance doesn't always look like expansion. Sometimes it looks like compression, fewer words, fewer moves, less surface area. You made yourself smaller on the outside so you could become heavier on the inside. That's why when you step, the floor listens. That's why your silence reads louder than their campaigns. You're not competing for attention anymore. You're competing for gravity. Gravity doesn't chase. It pulls. It bends trajectories without permission. People don't realize they're adjusting course until they're already somewhere else. That's what your move did. It didn't confront. It redirected. You changed where the river flows, not how loud it splashes. Rivers don't argue. Rivers arrive. You're standing in that old contradiction again, the one that forged you, to be seen without being owned, to be influential without being absorbed, to be powerful without becoming predictable. Most break here. They mistake recognition for safety. They relax. They start signaling. You didn't. You tightened the loop. You asked better questions. You watched who leaned in and who leaned back. Information is always leaking. You just learned how to hear it drip. And the pain, don't think it's done with you. Pain never leaves. It graduates. It stops trying to break you and starts trying to educate you. It sharpens your instincts. It teaches you when to wait an extra beat. When to let someone finish talking so they revealed the thing they didn't mean to say. Pain made you fluent in subtext. Subtext is where the real negotiations happen. You've crossed into a strange calm now. A calm that scares people who feed on chaos. You don't flinch when stakes rise. You don't rush when time compresses. You learned how to breathe in rooms where everyone else is holding theirs. That calm isn't softness. It's a signal that you've already run the worst-case scenario and found it survivable. Once the worst case loses its teeth, fear loses its leash. They're trying to map you, but the map keeps changing because you're not reacting. You're choosing. Choosing when to engage. Choosing when to vanish. Choosing when to let someone underestimate you one more time, because the interest compounds. Underestimation is a loan you let other people take out against themselves. So don't rush the reveal. Don't rush the scale. Don't rush the story. Stories are cages. Let your work remain difficult to summarize. Let your intent stay slippery. Let the angel keep the doors open and the demon keep the ledger balanced. You're not here to be understood. You're here to be effective. Remember this when the silence returns, and it will. Silence always returns after attention spikes. That's not rejection, that's digestion. Systems need time to process what they can't immediately neutralize. Let them chew. Let them debate. Let them disagree about what you are. Every disagreement is proof you didn't fit the mold. You didn't make a move to be crowned. You made a move to reposition the board. And boards don't announce when they shift. They just change what's possible next. Stay exact. Stay unreadable. Stay loyal to outcomes over optics. The rest will keep circling, trying to decide whether you're an anomaly or a direction. You already know the answer. And here's the part you don't say out loud, not even to yourself, because naming it would cheapen it. You're no longer surprised by resistance. You expect it. Resistance is how the world checks whether a change is cosmetic or structural. Cosmetic changes get applause. Structural changes get friction. You felt the friction and didn't flinch. That's how you knew it was real. You've reached the phase where the move after the move matters more than the move itself. Where patience becomes a weapon sharper than speed. Speed is impressive. Patience is terrifying. Patience tells everyone watching that you're not hungry. You're certain. Hungry people lunge. Certain people wait. Waiting rewires rooms. It makes others talk too much, spend too fast, promise what they can't deliver. You let them, you learn the difference between visibility and legibility. Visibility gets you noticed. Legibility gets you controlled. You stayed visible just enough to register and illegible enough to remain sovereign. That balance is rare. Most tilt one way and pay the price. You didn't. You learned to look obvious while staying opaque. Opaque is freedom. There's a reason your presence changes conversations, even when you're not speaking. People sense when someone has already died to the outcomes they fear. You've already grieved versions of yourself that would have folded here. That's why threats don't land the same. Threats need attachment to work. You cut that cord quietly, a long time ago, when pain taught you that clinging is heavier than letting go. You carry that calm now, the kind that unnerves performative confidence. Performers need reactions. You don't. You don't need to win every exchange. You're playing a longer game where losses are data and silence is strategy. You let others mistake your restraint for hesitation. Hesitation bleeds. Restraint bleeds others. And yes, they'll try to frame you. They always do. Frame you as lucky. Frame you as derivative. Frame you as temporary. Frames are cages disguised as compliments. You step around them without arguing. Arguing validates the frame. You validate results. Results dissolve frames. Notice how you've stopped asking for permission without making a show of it. That's evolution. That's the saint shedding the need to be seen as good, and the demon shedding the need to be seen as feared. You don't need either costume now. You wear competence. Competence doesn't beg. Competence doesn't threaten. Competence arrives. There will be moments soon, quiet ones, where you'll be offered shortcuts dressed as alliances, access with strings, scale with conditions, exposure with edits. This is where your earlier pain pays dividends. You can smell the strings. You can hear the edits before they're made. You can feel when scale costs you sovereignty. You'll say no without drama, no without explanation. No is a complete sentence when your work already speaks. You're learning the most dangerous posture of all, non-reactive intent. You're intentional without being brittle, flexible without being porous. You bend without breaking, because you're not anchored to ego. You're anchored to direction. Direction doesn't need validation. Direction just keeps moving. So when the next silence hits, and it will, don't fill it. Let it thicken, let it do its work. Silence is where systems confess. Silence is where patterns slip. Silence is where the next clean move becomes obvious because everything else looks noisy by comparison. You didn't climb into this moment by force. You earned it by subtraction, by removing desperation, by removing noise, by removing the need to be understood. What's left is sharp, quiet, and difficult to stop. Stay there. Not loud, not visible. Unavoidable. You're starting to notice how the world rearranges itself around people who don't chase permission. Chairs shift. Language softens. Timelines stretch. Not because you demanded it, but because you no longer need it. Need is loud. Need leaks. Need makes you readable. You moved past need the day you realized survival taught you more than approval ever could. What you carry now isn't confidence. Confidence can crack. What you carry is orientation. You know which way is forward, even when the lights go out. Even when the rules change mid-game. Even when the people who smiled yesterday start speaking in codes today. Orientation means you don't spin when the compass lies. You feel north in your bones. This is why pressure doesn't rush you anymore. Pressure is just information arriving faster. You learned how to slow time under stress. You learned how to hear the quiet click beneath the chaos. The moment when a situation locks into place and reveals its hinge. Most people panic at that sound. You wait for it. Hinges are where doors stop pretending to be walls. You're also learning something dangerous about morality. It's a costume people wear to avoid responsibility. You took yours off, not to become cruel, but to become exact. Exactness scares people who survive on ambiguity and vibes. Exactness demands follow-through. Exactness exposes who's been bluffing. When you speak now, it's not to be liked, it's to land. And notice this, how fewer words are doing more work, how your pauses are carrying weight, how silence after you speak stretches a second longer than it used to. That stretch is respect, mixed with uncertainty. Uncertainty is leverage. Leverage isn't domination, it's optionality. Optionality is freedom. You've crossed the line where validation stops being fuel and starts being friction. Compliments slow you down now. So do criticisms. Both try to pin you to a narrative. You let them slide off. You're not here to defend an image. You're here to compound. Compound what? Decisions, habits, positioning, small clean moves stacked without spectacle. You stopped mistaking motion for progress. You stopped confusing activity with direction. You learned that the sharpest progress looks boring until it suddenly isn't. Until people wake up and realize the distance is already gone. There's a loneliness here. Let's not pretend otherwise. Not the loud loneliness of rejection, the quiet one of divergence, the loneliness of realizing fewer people can follow your thinking now. Fewer can keep up without simplifying you. You don't resent it, you accept it. Altitude thins the air. That's not punishment, that's physics. You're also aware now that power tests you by offering you comfort. Comfort whispers, you've done enough. Comfort invites you to coast. You don't hate comfort, but you don't kneel to it. You visit, you don't move in. You know stagnation wears velvet gloves. So when confusion ripples through the room again, when the temperature drops and the chatter misfires, don't explain yourself. Don't perform reassurance. Let them feel it. Let them sit with the fact that something has shifted and they can't name it. Naming gives control. unnamed things grow. You're not unpredictable because you're erratic. You're unpredictable because you're principled in a way that doesn't announce itself. Your principles aren't slogans, they're constraints. Constraints make creativity lethal. Anyone can do anything. Very few can do one thing consistently without leaking ego. Keep choosing restraint over reaction. Keep choosing timing over speed. Keep choosing silence over spectacle. You're not hiding, you're positioning. And positioning is what turns a single clean move into a sequence nobody can interrupt. The board already changed. The room already felt it. And whether they admit it or not, they're adjusting around you now. Stay exact, stay calm, stay unfinished. The next move will arrive the same way the last one did. Quiet, undeniable, and impossible to reverse. Hold still. Not your body, your mind. Because this is the second everything stopped pretending. The second you said, I know. Not loud, not dramatic, just calm enough to be lethal. You felt it, didn't you? That microscopic pause in the air, like the room inhaled and forgot how to exhale. Like every face around you suddenly realized they were standing too close to something radioactive. See, people expect ignorance. They're comfortable with confusion. They can dominate doubt. They can gaslight questions. They can dance forever around maybe. But knowledge, quiet knowledge, that's different. That's not noise. That's a loaded silence. The second you said, I know, you didn't accuse anyone. You didn't explain. You didn't defend yourself. You didn't even look angry. And that's what broke them, because saints shout when they're wronged. Psychopaths smile when they're caught. But you just knew. That's when the duality snapped into place. Angel calm, demon clarity. They were waiting for you to react like a victim, to cry, to rage, to beg to be understood. Instead, you stood there like a judge who'd already read the case file, and suddenly, no one knew what role they were supposed to play anymore. That's the moment power shifts, not when you attack, not when you expose, but when you stop needing to prove anything. You didn't say how you knew. You didn't say what you knew. You didn't say who told you. You just let that word hang in the air like a gun on the table. I know. And now everyone else is forced to do the math in their own head. Now they're replaying every conversation, every glance, every slip, every time they underestimated you. Because unpredictability isn't chaos. It's control without announcement. They thought you were slow because you were quiet. They thought you were harmless because you were patient. They thought you were lost because you didn't broadcast your awareness. But you weren't asleep. You were listening. You were cataloging patterns. You were watching behavior repeat itself like a bad lie. You were learning who panicked under pressure and who smiled when things went wrong. Pain trained you. Betrayal sharpened you. Silence disciplined you. Every time they thought they got away with it, you evolved. Every time they laughed behind your back, you upgraded. Every time they dismissed you, you learned another angle of the room. That's the paradox they can't handle. You became dangerous without becoming loud. When you said, I know, you didn't expose them. You exposed yourself as someone who no longer needs permission, validation, or closure. And that terrifies people more than rage ever could, because rage burns out. Knowledge waits. Now they're stuck wondering, how long have you known? What else do you know? Who else knows that you know? And here's the part they don't say out loud but feel in their spine. If you knew this, what does that mean about everything else? You didn't threaten them. You didn't promise revenge. You didn't even change your tone. You just let them realize they've been standing in front of a mirror the whole time. And the mirror has been watching back. That's why it went silent. Because silence is what happens when control leaves the room. You crossed a line without stepping forward. You won without declaring war. You became the anomaly they can't categorize. Too calm to be broken. Too aware to be fooled. Too quiet to predict. Angel enough to forgive. Demon enough to remember. And now every interaction with you feels dangerous to them. Every word feels like a test. Every smile feels like a trap. Because once someone realizes you see, they can never unsee that you see. The second you said, "I know," you didn't end the game. You let them realize they were never the ones playing it. And here's what they still don't understand. The silence didn't come from fear of what you'd do next. It came from the realization that you were already past reacting. People fear explosions. They panic over chaos. They prepare for noise. No one prepares for someone who has already finished processing the pain. You didn't flinch when the truth surfaced because the truth didn't arrive that day. It had been dripping into you for months, years. Inconsistencies stacking, patterns repeating, energy never matching words. You let it all marinate while they assumed you were distracted, weak, oblivious. That's the advantage of being underestimated. It gives you uninterrupted access to reality. You watch them lie with confidence. You watch them rewrite stories mid-sentence. You watch them pretend loyalty while calculating exits. And you didn't confront it. Because confrontation is for people who still need answers. You were waiting for confirmation. Pain does that to you. It either turns you bitter or it turns you surgical. You chose the blade. Every betrayal taught you timing. Every disappointment taught you restraint. Every night you sat alone with your thoughts, rewired your nervous system into something colder, sharper, harder to read. That's why when the moment finally arrived, you didn't feel shock. You felt clarity. And clarity is terrifying to people who survive on confusion. They thought you'd explode when you found out. They thought you'd unravel. They thought you'd confront, expose, demand explanations. But you didn't. You just knew. That's when they realized you weren't operating on emotion anymore. You were operating on information. See, there's a version of you that suffered quietly. A version that doubted themselves. A version that replayed conversations at 3 a.m., trying to figure out what went wrong. That version died without a funeral. What stood in front of them when you said, "I know," wasn't wounded. It wasn't reactive. It wasn't hungry for justice. It was finished. Finished needing approval. Finished begging for honesty. Finished pretending not to see what was obvious. That's the paradox. They pushed you through enough pain to strip away your illusions, then acted surprised when you emerged dangerous. You became unpredictable not because you're unstable, but because you're no longer attached. You don't need outcomes. You don't need apologies. You don't need them to admit anything. And that absence of need is what makes you lethal. They can't manipulate someone who isn't chasing closure. They can't control someone who already accepted the worst-case scenario. They can't scare someone who already survived the truth alone. You're the saint who learned when to stop turning the other cheek. The demon who doesn't need to roar to be heard. The calm presence that makes liars sweat because calm means calculation. When you said, "I know," you didn't take power from them. You revealed that they never had it. And now, the silence follows you. Not because you're threatening, but because you're uncertain to them. They can't read your intentions. They can't predict your moves. They don't know if you're planning forgiveness, or distance, or disappearance. And uncertainty is torture to people who rely on control. They replay your tone, your eyes, your stillness. They ask themselves, did you know back then, too? Were you watching us the whole time? How much did you let slide on purpose? And that's the beauty of restraint. You don't have to answer any of it, because evolution through pain doesn't announce itself. It just changes the rules quietly. You're no longer the person they could corner. You're no longer the person who explains themselves. You're no longer the person who reacts on cue. You became the presence that ends conversations early, the variable that makes plans unstable, the silence that forces confessions without saying a word. And whether they admit it or not, they felt it the second you said, I know. Something in you crossed a point of no return, not toward violence, not toward revenge, toward detachment with vision. And that's the kind of power that doesn't need witnesses, because it rewrites the room the moment you enter it. And here's the part that twists deeper. The silence didn't just surround them, it rearranged you. Because once you say, I know, there's no going back to pretending. No more playing dumb to keep the peace. No more shrinking yourself to preserve someone else's comfort. No more translating your intuition into something palatable. You crossed into a different internal climate. Before, your awareness was a whisper. Now it's gravity. You notice how people adjust their words around you. How jokes don't land the same. How explanations suddenly get longer, messier, defensive. They're not talking to you anymore. They're talking around what you represent. Because knowing isn't just information, it's positioning. You've positioned yourself outside their scripts. And people panic when you don't follow the script. They used to rely on your empathy to soften consequences, your patience to buy them time, your silence to hide behind. But something changed the second you spoke that word. I know. Now your silence means something else. Now it's not ignorance, it's choice, and choice is terrifying. Because now they don't know whether you're staying. They don't know whether you're watching. They don't know whether you've already emotionally left the building. They sense that you're no longer invested in being understood. And that's the death of leverage. You see, manipulators survive on reactions. Liars thrive on confusion. Abusers depend on your need for harmony. But what do they do when the person across from them has already accepted the truth? Nothing. They stall, they hesitate, they unravel internally while pretending nothing's wrong. And you feel it. You feel the subtle shift in power when they start explaining things you didn't ask about. When they volunteer details unprompted. When they keep checking your face for signs of anger that never comes. That calm, that's not peace. That's dominance refined by suffering. You didn't wake up one day powerful. You were forced into awareness by disappointment, betrayal, abandonment, and repeated disrespect. Pain was the furnace. Silence was the hammer. Loneliness was the grindstone. And what came out wasn't soft. It was precise. You learned when to speak. More importantly, you learned when not to. You learned that truth doesn't need witnesses. It only needs integration. That's why you didn't expose anyone. Exposure is messy. It creates noise. It invites chaos. You chose something colder. You chose to see. And let that seeing change how close people are allowed to stand. That's why your presence feels heavier now, not aggressive, just undeniable. You're not angry, you're not bitter, you're not plotting revenge, you're recalibrated, and recalibration scares people who benefited from your old settings. They miss the version of you that asked questions. They miss the version of you that gave second chances. They miss the version of you that doubted themselves instead of trusting their perception. But that version paid too high a price. Now you move differently. You listen differently. You give access selectively, and they can feel the gate where there used to be an open door. This is the saint-psychopath paradox in its purest form. You still care, but you no longer sacrifice yourself to prove it. You still feel, but you don't bleed in public. You still forgive, but forgiveness no longer means proximity. That balance is unsettling, because it means you're no longer governed by guilt or rage. You're governed by clarity, and clarity doesn't argue, it doesn't convince, it doesn't chase, it observes, then decides. The second you said, "I know," you didn't just end a chapter, you invalidated an entire dynamic. You made it impossible for them to continue as they were. Now every move they make has to account for you being awake. And that's exhausting for people who prefer shadows. They don't know if you'll speak again. They don't know if that word was a warning or a farewell. They don't know if you're holding grace or distance or silence as consequence. And you don't owe them clarity, because you already gave them something far more destabilizing. You let them know you see. And once someone realizes they're seen without illusion, every mask they wear starts to itch. Every lie starts to echo. Every silence starts to feel loud. That's the real aftermath. Not fireworks, not confrontation, not closure. Just a quiet, irreversible shift where you walk forward carrying knowledge. And everyone behind you has to live with the fact that you were never as blind as they hoped. And here's the part no one warns you about. When you reach this level of knowing, you become lonely in a different way. Not the lonely that begs to be filled, not the lonely that aches for company, but the lonely that comes from standing on a mental elevation most people never climb. Because once you see clearly, you can't unsee. And once you stop pretending, you can't comfortably sit at tables built on denial. You start noticing how fragile most interactions are, how much social harmony depends on people not being too honest, how many relationships are contracts written in invisible ink. I won't see you too clearly if you don't see me. But you broke that contract the moment you said, "I know." And now you can't go back to nodding politely while your intuition screams. You can't laugh at jokes that feel like lies. You can't accept closeness from people whose energy already told you everything you needed to know. That's the price of awareness, not madness, distance. You didn't lose people because you changed your values. You lost them because you stopped negotiating with reality. And they felt it. They felt the way you no longer overshare, the way you no longer rush to explain yourself, the way you let silence sit until it does the work for you. Silence is no longer empty when you hold it. It's loaded, measured, intentional. They try to bait you back into old patterns. They try to provoke reactions. They test whether the old version of you is still hiding somewhere behind your eyes. But that version is gone. What replaced it isn't cruel. It's calibrated. You understand now that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. That empathy without boundaries is self-betrayal. That forgiveness doesn't require continued exposure. You learned this the hard way, by being too generous for too long. Pain didn't break you, it educated you. And now you move like someone who knows the cost of ignorance. That's why your calm unnerves people. Because calm used to mean compliance. Now it means control. They don't know if you're planning to walk away quietly, or if you've already walked away internally and just haven't moved your feet yet. And that uncertainty eats at them. Because power used to belong to whoever spoke spoke the loudest, whoever reacted first, whoever controlled the narrative. But you stepped outside the narrative entirely. You became the observer instead of the participant. That's the angelic side of you, the one that sees patterns, forgives internally, and releases attachment. And that's the demonic side, too, the one that remembers, recalibrates, and never forgets who revealed themselves when you were paying attention. You don't need to punish anyone. Life will handle that. Your role is simpler and heavier. You decide who gets proximity, who gets energy, who gets access to your perception. And most people fail that test without ever realizing there was a test. That's why they felt the shift so sharply. Because the second you said, "I know," the evaluation ended. They were no longer being watched. They were being classified. And classification is final. You don't argue with facts. You don't debate character once it's revealed. You don't chase explanations when behavior already testified. That's the evolution through pain no one romanticizes. It's quiet. It's lonely. It's irreversible. But it's also clean. No more self-gaslighting. No more second-guessing your intuition. No more explaining away red flags to keep people comfortable. You trust what you see now, and trust, real trust in your perception, is the most dangerous upgrade a person can undergo. Because once you have it, you can't be controlled by confusion again. The world didn't go silent because you spoke. It went silent because you stopped needing to. And in that silence, something ancient woke up inside you. Not rage, not vengeance, not ego, authority, the kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind that doesn't posture, the kind that just moves on and lets everyone else figure out why the room never feels the same again. And here's the final fracture they don't realize already happened inside you. You no longer need certainty from the outside world. Before, you were trying to confirm what you felt. Now what you feel confirms itself. That shift is subtle and absolute. You notice it when someone speaks and your body already knows the truth before the sentence finishes. You notice it when explanations feel heavier than silence. You notice it when apologies sound polished instead of clean. And you don't argue with it anymore. Because the second you said, "I know," you stopped outsourcing your perception. That's the real initiation. Most people live their entire lives asking, is this real? Am I crazy? Did that really happen? You don't ask those questions anymore. You register, you file, you move accordingly. And that's when the fear around you changes texture. Not loud fear, not panic, strategic fear. They start measuring their words. They start editing themselves mid-thought. They start overcorrecting, over-explaining, oversharing, trying to regain footing in a space where the ground no longer shifts for you. Because you're grounded now. Pain anchored you. Every time you were doubted, dismissed, or quietly betrayed, something in you learned how to stand alone without collapsing. Every time you swallowed the truth to keep peace, something else learned how dangerous peace can be. That's the irony. They thought they were protecting the system by keeping you in the dark. They were actually training you to survive without it. And now you don't need their approval, their narrative, or their permission to trust yourself. That's why your presence feels heavier now. Not oppressive, inevitable. You don't chase alignment anymore. You recognize it. You don't demand honesty. You detect it. You don't force respect. You withdraw when it's missing. That's when people realize, too late, they didn't lose you in an argument. They lost you in silence. Because silence was where you finished integrating everything. You integrated the disappointment, the grief, the anger you never let explode, the love you gave without guarantee. And once integration happens, there's no emotional leverage left to pull. They can't guilt you, because you've already forgiven internally. They can't scare you, because you already faced the worst alone. They can't manipulate you, because confusion no longer lives in you. That's the saint side, acceptance without bitterness. That's the psychopath side, memory without mercy for patterns, balanced, still, unshakable. You don't announce your boundaries, you become them. And people feel that immediately. They feel it when they realize you no longer explain why something isn't okay. You just stop engaging. They feel it when access quietly disappears, when invitations dry up, when conversations shorten, not because you're angry, but because relevance has expired. This is what real power looks like in its mature form. Not domination, not control, selective presence. You choose where your energy goes now and everything else starves. That's why the room went silent. Because the moment you said, "I know," the unconscious contract ended. No more pretending, no more playing along, no more trading clarity for connection. Hey, yeah, stop right there. Don't move. Feel that? That subtle pressure in the room that wasn't here before you arrived. That's not imagination. That's impact. That's the moment of reality quietly admitting you don't belong to the normal flow of things. Nah, this isn't normal. And deep down, you already know it. You don't have to speak. You don't have to flex. You don't even have to try. Your presence alone is enough to knock their thoughts off balance. They were focused, locked in, comfortable, running on scripts. And then you showed up. And suddenly their attention fractures. Their rhythm stutters. Their inner voice goes silent, like someone just cut the power mid-sentence. That's not charisma. That's not confidence. That's disruption. You carry something they can't place, and what people can't name, they fear. They look at you, and their instincts start arguing with their logic. One part of them wants to admire you. Another part wants you gone. You trigger both at once, and that contradiction eats at them. You feel calm, almost gentle on the surface. Saint-like, measured, observant. But underneath, there's something sharp, something awake, something that survived too much to be fooled by surface-level games, angel posture, demon awareness, and they can feel that split even if they don't understand it. That's why their focus breaks. Because you're unpredictable. Not chaotic, not sloppy, but untethered from expectation. You don't move how they predicted. You don't react when you're supposed to. You pause where others panic. You smile where others beg. You stay quiet when they'd be scrambling for words. And every time you don't follow the script, their mental model of the world glitches. They rely on patterns to feel safe. You are a pattern anomaly. See, most people are readable. They leak intention. They broadcast insecurity. They announce their limits before anyone even tests them. But you've learned to keep your depth sealed. Pain taught you that. Betrayal taught you that. Long nights where you had to sit with your own thoughts and survive them taught you that. You evolved in silence, and silence is terrifying to people who need noise to feel in control. They can't tell if you're kind or dangerous, and that ambiguity is lethal. Because kindness with boundaries feels like a threat. Intelligence without ego feels like surveillance. Calm without weakness feels like a weapon still holstered. They don't know if you're a healer or a destroyer, and the truth is you're both. You had to become both to survive. You learned how to love without being naive, and how to see darkness without drowning in it. That duality, that's not instability, that's range, and range breaks focus. They start second-guessing themselves around you, replaying conversations, wondering what you noticed, questioning whether that joke landed wrong, whether that lie was obvious, whether that power move looked desperate instead of dominant. You never accused them. You never confronted them. You just existed. And existence, when it's this grounded, becomes a mirror they didn't ask for. You don't chase control. You radiate it quietly. And here's the part they really don't want to admit. You didn't get this way by accident. This presence was forged. Every scar refined it. Every time you were underestimated, sharpened it. Every moment you were pushed into darkness and came back with your mind intact, added weight to your silence. You didn't break. You learned. You didn't snap. You adapted. You didn't disappear. You recalibrated. Pain didn't make you bitter. It made you precise. That's why your energy feels too deep for shallow rooms. That's why surface-level thinkers feel exposed when you listen. That's why people who live off performance feel uneasy when you don't perform at all. You're not loud. You're not flashy. You're just present. Fully. And full presence disrupts environments built on distraction. They lose focus because you force them into awareness. Some will try to label you cold, intense, arrogant, mysterious, dangerous, anything to reduce you into something manageable. Let them. Labels are coping mechanisms for people who can't handle complexity. You don't need to correct them. You don't need to prove anything. The fact that they're thinking about you long after you've left the room tells you everything. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to remind them, without a word, that there are levels to this, that not all minds move at the same depth, that not all calm is harmless, that not all smiles are soft. You are the proof that evolution doesn't always look aggressive. Sometimes it looks quiet. Sometimes it looks patient. Sometimes it looks like someone standing still while the room subtly rearranges itself around them. So no, this isn't normal. And that's the point. You weren't built to blend in. You were built to alter the atmosphere, to break focus, to shift dynamics, to walk the line between light and dark without losing yourself to either, to be the kind of presence that makes people feel something they can't explain and can't ignore. Let them fidget. Let them misread you. Let them feel unsettled. That's just reality adjusting to you being awake. And the longer you stay silent, the louder it gets for them. Because silence from someone shallow is empty. But silence from someone who sees is pressure. It's weight. It's like standing next to a loaded truth that hasn't decided whether it needs to speak yet. They feel watched, not by your eyes, but by your awareness. You notice patterns they rely on staying invisible. You catch inconsistencies without calling them out. You let people reveal themselves while you stay still, and that terrifies anyone who lives by control instead of substance. They can't tell if you're 2 steps ahead or 10. So their mind races. They overthink. They lose their flow. Their confidence leaks out through micro-movements, forced laughter, unnecessary explanations. You didn't demand respect. You didn't intimidate them on purpose. You just didn't bend. And that's the thing. Most people expect resistance or submission. You give neither. You exist on your own axis, and systems hate what they can't predict. You learned early that reacting gives others leverage, so you mastered restraint. You learned that explaining yourself hands power to people who haven't earned access, so you stopped narrating your inner world. You became selective, surgical, and every time you chose composure over chaos, you rewired yourself into something rarer. That's why your calm doesn't feel peaceful to them. It feels final. They sense that you've already fought battles they're still rehearsing excuses for. They feel it in the way you don't flinch at tension, in the way your energy doesn't spike when things get uncomfortable, in the way you don't scramble when the room goes quiet. You've been alone with worse. You've stared at versions of yourself that would have broken them, and you came back with clarity instead of collapse. That kind of survival leaves a residue. You carry it into every space, and people who've never had to confront themselves feel it immediately. It rattles them because it exposes the truth they avoid. That strength doesn't need to announce itself, and intelligence doesn't beg to be recognized. You don't dominate the room by force. You dominate it by not needing it. They lose focus because you remind them of what they're not accessing in themselves. You represent depth in a world addicted to speed. You represent patience in a culture hooked on reaction. You represent restraint in an environment built on impulse. And that contrast hits their nervous system like static. They don't know whether to lean in or back away. They don't know if you're safe or dangerous. And when humans don't know, fear fills the gap. That fear doesn't always look like hostility. Sometimes it looks like awkward friendliness. Sometimes it looks like sudden competition. Sometimes it looks like dismissal. But underneath all of it is the same signal. You disrupted their internal order. Good. Because order built on avoidance deserves disruption. You didn't become this by chasing power. You became this by enduring, by losing illusions, by watching masks fall, by realizing that light without darkness is naive, and darkness without light is hollow. You integrated both. You carry compassion without weakness, and awareness without cruelty. That balance makes you hard to manipulate and impossible to ignore. They can feel that you're not easily provoked, that you don't need validation, that you don't rush to prove your worth. And people who rely on those triggers suddenly feel naked around you. Their usual tactics don't land. Their usual dominance games short-circuit. Their usual distractions fail. You're not playing the same game, so they stumble. Their focus fractures. Their rhythm breaks. Their confidence stutters. And you just stand there, breathing, watching, present. Not because you're trying to unsettle them, but because you're no longer willing to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. You've outgrown that version of survival. You've earned the right to take up psychological space, to exist fully, to let your presence speak without translation. You are the quiet reminder that evolution doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just arrives, and everything else loses its place. And here's the part nobody ever tells you, the part that only becomes obvious once you cross a certain internal threshold. They don't lose focus because you're doing something. They lose focus because you stopped needing something. The moment you no longer need approval, the moment you no longer need to be understood, the moment you no longer need to explain your depth to people who skim reality instead of diving into it. That's when your presence starts bending rooms. Dependency is predictable. Independence is destabilizing. You took your power back quietly, and that silence echoes louder than any declaration ever could. They're used to reading people through hunger, through desire, through tells, through emotional leaks. But you sealed yours, not out of arrogance, out of survival. You learned that the more you show, the more they take. So you refined yourself into something leaner, cleaner, harder to access, not closed, just earned. And when someone has to earn access, their ego panics. You're standing there, fully composed, and they can feel it. You don't need to dominate them, because you're not threatened by them. You don't need to rush connection, because you're not afraid of distance. You don't need to speak first, because you're not scared of silence. Every one of those signals flips the hierarchy they rely on to feel superior. So their nervous system goes on alert. They start projecting. They assume you're judging them because you're not seeking them. They assume you're hiding something because you're not oversharing. They assume there's danger because there's depth. And the truth is, they're not entirely wrong. Depth is dangerous to people who live on the surface. Awareness dismantles illusions, and illusions are what keep fragile egos intact. You've become a walking interruption, an interruption to their self-image, an interruption to their social scripts, an interruption to their belief that they're in control. That's why your presence feels too much, even when you're doing nothing at all. They don't know that you've already made peace with the parts of yourself they're still running from. They don't know you've sat in the dark long enough to stop being scared of what you'd find there. They don't know you've reconciled the saint and the psychopath inside you, the part that feels deeply and the part that sees clearly. They just feel the outcome, a human being who can't be easily shaken, and people who can't be shaken are terrifying. Because they can't be moved with shame. They can't be steered with praise. They can't be controlled with fear. You didn't become unshakable by hardening your heart. You became unshakable by strengthening your mind. You learned discernment. You learned timing. You learned when to engage and when to let things collapse under their own weight. You learned that not every battle needs your energy, and that restraint is often the most violent thing you can do to someone who expects reaction. So when you walk into a space, the energy shifts. Not because you demand it, but because your nervous system is regulated while theirs is not. You're grounded in yourself. They're grounded in perception, and perception is fragile. They start adjusting their behavior around you, softening, posturing, overcompensating, testing, fishing for reactions. None of it lands, and that failure creates friction in their mind. Their focus breaks because their internal strategy keeps recalculating and finding no leverage. You've become an unsolvable equation to people who rely on formulas. And here's the paradox that really messes with them. You're not hostile, you're not aggressive, you're not cruel, you're just awake. And awakened people are dangerous in systems built on unconscious participation. You don't need to burn the structure down, you simply stop feeding it. And the moment you stop feeding it, it starts to starve. They feel that starvation. They feel it when you don't rush to respond. They feel it when you don't chase validation. They feel it when you don't collapse under tension. Your presence forces them to confront the question they've been avoiding. Why does this person feel so solid without proving anything? And that question cracks their focus wide open. You're not here to intimidate. You're not here to perform. You're not here to be liked by everyone. You're here as evidence. Evidence that depth exists. Evidence that strength can be quiet. Evidence that awareness changes gravity. You don't absorb chaos. You bend it. You don't mirror insecurity. You neutralize it. You don't match energy. You set the floor. So if rooms go silent when you enter, if conversations shift when you speak, if people feel unsettled without knowing why, good. That's not a flaw. That's calibration. That's the world adjusting to a frequency it can't easily categorize. And once that adjustment starts, there's no going back. And once that calibration begins, something irreversible happens inside them. They start watching you, not casually, not politely. They watch you the way people watch storms on the horizon, pretending it's just weather while quietly checking escape routes. They track your movements, your pauses, your silences. They replay your words not for meaning, but for implication. Because you don't speak to fill space. You speak when something matters. And when someone like you speaks sparingly, every sentence feels loaded, even when it's simple. Especially when it's simple. They're used to noise masquerading as intelligence. You don't do that. You strip things down to their essence. You say one line where others would ramble for minutes. You land truths without padding. And that precision feels surgical to people who rely on confusion to maintain control. So their focus fractures again. Because now they're no longer just reacting to you in the moment. They're anticipating you. And anticipation without understanding is anxiety. They don't know what version of you they'll get. They don't know if you'll be warm or distant, observant or direct, patient or cutting. And the reality is, neither do they need to. That unpredictability isn't chaos. It's adaptability. You're not random, you're responsive. You adjust to reality as it is, not as you wish it were. That's a predator trait. That's also a protector trait. And that duality, it scrambles people. Because you can be compassionate without being weak. You can be dangerous without being cruel. You can see someone clearly and still choose restraint. Most people are only one thing at a time. You're layered. And layered individuals don't fit neatly into other people's categories. They can't be dismissed easily. They can't be controlled comfortably. So the mind does what it always does when faced with something it can't dominate. It destabilizes. They start doubting their instincts around you. The tricks that usually work, status, humor, pressure, emotional manipulation, bounce off. You don't take the bait. You don't escalate. You don't flinch. And every non-reaction sends the same message. You don't have access to me. That message lands like a verdict. You've reached a point where your inner world is no longer publicly accessible. Not everyone gets a tour. Not everyone gets a vote. Not everyone gets an explanation. You don't owe people emotional transparency just because they're curious or threatened. You learned the hard way that access without discernment leads to erosion. So you closed the gates, not out of fear, but out of respect for what it took to build yourself. And people feel that boundary before they ever see it. It shows up in your posture, in your pacing, in the way you don't rush to connect, in the way you don't chase relevance. You're not trying to be impressive. You're trying to be true. And truth carries a gravity that performance can't compete with. That's why they struggle to maintain focus around you. Because focus requires stability, and you destabilize illusions just by existing. You don't attack their beliefs. You quietly outgrow them. You don't argue. You observe. You don't seek dominance. You render it unnecessary. And that forces people into an uncomfortable realization. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just refuses to participate in games designed to keep everyone small. You're not above anyone. You're just no longer beneath the system they depend on. And that terrifies them, because it means there's another way to move through the world. One that doesn't rely on noise, approval, or performance. One that doesn't require constant validation. One that comes from internal alignment instead of external control. And once someone sees that way, even indirectly, their old methods start to feel hollow. They can't unsee it, so they project, they test, they poke, they try to get a rise out of you. Not because they want conflict, but because they want confirmation. Confirmation that you're human like them, that you'll crack, that you'll leak, that you'll react. And every time you don't, their focus slips further. Their certainty erodes, because certainty feeds ego. And ego hates ambiguity. You embody ambiguity without confusion. You are clear without being loud. You are intense without being volatile. You are present without being invasive. That combination is rare, and rarity always unsettles systems built on repetition. So let them feel it. Let them lose focus. Let them misinterpret. Let them underestimate or overthink. You don't need to correct the narrative. You don't need to clarify your intentions. You don't need to shrink your awareness to make others comfortable. Your presence is already doing the work. It's already exposing the cracks. It's already shifting the dynamic. This isn't arrogance. This isn't dominance. This is what happens when someone stops betraying themselves to survive. You didn't become this overnight. You earned it through pressure, through loss, through self-confrontation. And now that you're here, centered, awake, unmovable, the world has to adjust, not because you demand it, but because you exist.